Atlassian design team flew all the way here from Sydney. Maybe you came from his talk earlier in a different track room, but he's got a lot of cool things to share today. And a fun fact about Ben is that he's actually an avid home brewer. So give a round of applause for Ben.
Thanks so much. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Is anyone else into home brewing? Any hands? Fantastic. The brotherhood is here. Always good to know. Hey, thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to be talking to you about going from good to great with concept testing. I want to start with a question for you. Now, I'm assuming a lot of you here work with products, services, processes. Maybe you're involved in the design and building and concepting of services and products and processes, trying to make things better. Have you ever had that thought of like, yep, it's good, I want it to be great, but it's just really risky trying to make big changes in my product? Or let me say it another way. Have you ever thought, all we really seem to do is just nibble around the edges of what we're trying to improve, and we find it really hard to make those big leaps? Now, as Ryan said, my name's Ben. I'm a design strategist at Atlassian. And a lot of what I do is really kind of upstream design. I like to say I design with people rather than pixels. I love getting people into workshops. I do a lot of strategy work with them. I'm really on about what is the true value of what it is that we're trying to make and push out into the world. And I've been at this for over 15 years, and I find teams really struggle with kind of two things. And one is, let's go back there. One is this struggle with moving beyond iteration to innovation. That can be really hard. And then the second challenge is similar, making good product decisions confidently and making more of those decisions. It's so easy to kind of be held back and think, oh, what if and what if? So if I could sum up those two things, it's really, for me, about creative confidence. We all need more creative confidence in what we do. And what I want to share with you this afternoon is how I think concept testing can help you and your team gain more of that creative confidence in whatever it is that you're building. So let me just quickly run through what I'd like to cover in half an hour. So let's just level set first. What is concept testing? What do I mean by that? I really want to show you some examples in action and a few results of concept testing we've had, so you get a little window into that. I'll talk a little bit about how you might incorporate it into your own process, because I know that can be a bit of a scary thing. And lastly, I want to just focus on what that creative confidence means when it comes to the way we come up with ideas. All right, all of that in half an hour. Reckon we can do that? Okay, let's do it. Now, first of all, what is concept testing? Well, what it simply is, and by the way, can I just gauge, is there a feel in the room for knowledge of concept testing as opposed to usability testing? Who's currently testing prototypes and things like that with customers internally? A fair few of you? Awesome. Okay, that's great. Now, hopefully with that in mind, I hope I can add a bit more colour and nuance to your knowledge and maybe give you a few ideas to take away. So concept testing is all about just getting raw prototypes in front of customers. And by raw, I mean low fidelity, simple sketches, certainly not hi-fi clickable prototypes or anything too worked up. It's really about the lo-fi. And I'm going to return to this point around testing the idea, not just the execution of the idea. And concept testing is all about getting groups of about 8 to 12, my ideal number is 8, of people into a room with these concepts and having these structured discussions and activities around what they do for a living, what's the job that they're hiring your product to even do for them, and then having just structured discussions around that, but not too structured, because I really like to keep things a bit open and, as I say, try to uncover those happy accidental insights that can happen when you have like a really good, warm conversation with people that you have a vested interest in. So that's what concept testing is. What is it for? Now, for me, there are three aspects that the concept testing is great for. One is you gain a lot about customer context, what's going on in their world, their jobs, the tasks that they need to do. And one, as my sort of, I kind of nerd out on mental models and organisational psychology. I've always called myself a pop psychologist because I've hung around so many psychologists. I'm not qualified. But there's so much that organisational psychology can tell us about people's mental models. Do we have any organisational psychologists in the room by any chance? I might get away with it then, okay. You're going to show me up for something I don't know about. I know just enough to be dangerous there. But the point is, it's really good to find out what are those maps and models that people carry around in their head. The second thing concept testing is great for is obviously validating early. Take the risk away. It is so much better, and I'm sure for those of you who put your hands up before, you guys know this. Test early before a single line of code is written. And that's another one of the things I really like, is that rather than having all those awkward arguments further down the line, when there's already like capital spent code built in trying to improve it, you can have different sorts of arguments. I'm not saying it's plain sailing, but you have different sorts of arguments and more value-led arguments at the other end before any code is done. So it's about removing risk. Now let me, if you like, take you into an example, sort of a concept test that we run. So as I said, we typically run them between 8 to 10 people, sometimes 12. Typically takes 2 to 3 hours. So here we see a gentleman who he is currently reorganising. This is a bit of a card sorting exercise. He's currently reorganising a set of tasks that he wants, his order that he wants to do in Jira the first time that he gets into Jira. So we start with capturing their goals, their world, their work patterns. That's really familiar. Sorry, that's really important, starting with what's familiar to them. And then we go on to the actual concept testing proper, where we tend to have screen sketches printed out on large format paper. And in this photo, this is a set of project managers where they're looking at a new onboarding sequence for Jira. And the feedback is all about what works and what doesn't work. We're really careful about the language we use. It's not about what you like or don't like. We try to extract the subjectivity, and we keep it anchored in the tasks and the work context that earlier in that session that we would have been talking about. And the way they kind of give feedback is with these dots, red dots and green dots. Oh, by the way, did anyone happen to go past the workshop wall earlier today? Because we actually did some concept testing on some HipChat concepts. Did anyone see that? Oh, next time. But it's real simple. You just give people a bunch of green dots and red dots. Green for useful and red for not useful. And we do this in silence so that it kind of keeps things moving along, but it also stops any kind of group bias when people start voicing their opinions and maybe forming other people's opinions. So I like to do that in silence. And then we go through and talk about the red dots. So why are those red dots there? What's the reason for that? Oh, there's different expectation, good to know. And then we talk about what would you rather it be? All that sort of structured stuff. And we always have a little magic mirror set up going here with linked screens. I'm a huge fan of inviting other people, both within the team and around the team, to come and watch as well and make notes and write stickies and get their own insight out. Does anyone do these sort of things? A few, yeah? I mean, to me, like that's project documentation right there. You know, you can squirrel away hours and hours writing big results reports, or you can just get people in a room and get them to witness it themselves. And we build up so much more accurate empathy when we have everyone, product managers, developers, designers, in an observation room to see these things in action. Okay, let me show you some results. Welcome to Jira. Yeah, Mr. Popularity here. This one wasn't really that effective. And this is good. We like it when this happens. So they've gone and bled all over this. Now, obviously, there's a discussion that follows this. We find out why they put the red dots. And it turns out that it was really a bit redundant. It was just getting in their way, things like that. Now, compare that with this version. And we've got a welcome message that's tucked up above what's going on the screen, and it includes something useful. So that rated a bit better. Not perfect, but a bit better. So it's usual that we have at least 2 variations of concepts going on at the same time. So we assess strengths and weaknesses of each one. Here's another one. Right, so this is, again, part of a Jira onboarding experience. We're interested to see how people responded if we surfaced the workflow editor as part of that first experience. Now, there are issues here, issues with the language. People didn't understand the words add transition. And here's us with the assumption that showing things visually with boxes and arrows would actually help. And that assumption was smashed in a good way. Now contrast this with this second concept here. Now we have a helpful message at the top. The workflow is visualised as a board, and this was much more popular, and it got a lot more feedback about, yeah, it matches what I have in my head. This is useful to me. Now this has gone on to spawn several different A/B testing and in-product experiments based on surfacing a workflow editor for the first time as a board, as well as some other adaptations of this. All right, so it's probably important to clarify what it is not for. I might have asked before about usability testing. It's different to usability testing. It doesn't replace it, it's complementary. They kind of happen at either end of the design channel, if you like. So concept testing is not about testing specific screen designs. It's about testing the relevance and resonance of an idea rather than the execution of that idea in screens. So it's certainly not about testing button colors and the sort of stuff you do in A/B testing. A/B testing is brilliant for that. And I should say too, it's not a bake-off. It's not like, you know, a bunch of designers and customers are playing Survivor and we've got to vote off, you know, various unpopular concepts. It's not about that. It's about weighing the strengths and weaknesses of different concepts. Now that means that we can start getting much broader in our ideation. This is the part I'm excited about, we'll come to. Now, where does concept testing happen in our kind of product workflow? I'm generalizing here. It does vary from product to product. But let me say, it tends to start, there's more of it early on when we're doing more product strategy, product research and design. At some point, we package that up into a bunch of epics. They get devolved into a bunch of sprints and user stories. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that kind of action. And then there's a whole bunch of sprint-based development activity where we have these shippable increments going out. Sound familiar? Good. Now, obviously there's a stream of product strategy and design going on. And as each shippable increment goes out, we track how it's going and what the reactions are, and we try to feed that back in to the strategy and design. This is normal. Now along comes concept testing. As I mentioned, there's more up front, and then it's kind of happening in parallel. Not always in the same cadence, like that'd be a bit intense, really. It's not meant to be the same cadence. But what happens is every time we do any concept testing, it's feeding results into that same channel, if you like, of strategy and design. Now, the savvier among you here might have picked up on something. We've got two parallel streams going on here. Now, I know, and maybe this resonates with you, I know a lot of teams struggle with having to commit to roadmap-based development, sprint after sprint, as well as reserving time and brain space and energy for that more innovation that we all hunger for. And what we've got here is we're able to do it in parallel. Now that takes a lot of anxiety away because it means, like, if for the people who are working in sprint-based activity, they're not anxious about being all myopic about what they're doing because they know that there's this other concept testing stream going on as well. All right, now I did mention before, we talked about how concept testing can give you creative confidence. Now, what I want to do is I kind of want to turn that around. I want to ask in a different way. I want to say, how do we make ourselves less creative? Let's think about that for a minute. Now, for me, I think there's actually three different anxieties that we put on ourselves. And the first one is feasibility anxiety. Now, I'm sure this lovely Venn diagram of desirability, viability, and feasibility is familiar. A few nods around maybe, yeah? Now, when we ideate and we're coming up with lots of ideas, I think we can slip into this frame of thinking, and that's kind of been sold to us somewhere along the line, that our ideas have to hit that sweet spot, like that golden sweet spot in the middle, so we satisfy all three. And so that's what we think good ideas are. And I'm telling you, it's lies. It just doesn't work that way. And if you think like that, what happens is a poor old desirability misses out while we've got feasibility and viability kind of duking it out. Like, have we got budget and have we got capability? And we kind of miss the value, we miss the delight. And we all know it. And we think, okay, maybe next time. So that's the sort of first anxiety. And the second one is reputation anxiety. This is another story I think we've all bought into, where a history is like resplendent with these heroes of design and innovation, indeed present time as well. And there's this thing of like huge amounts of innovation and massive, brilliant ideas being birthed in one fell swoop by one dude. And yeah, we kind of know there's a company behind it and a lot of hard work, but that's not how it's sort of sold to us. Now, with our brain, we know that, but design is a head and heart thing, isn't it? And so when we're trying to ideate, this is what we buy into, that it's all about unearthing the big one. More lies. Again, it's a story that doesn't really play out in reality. Now, what happens is if we have that mentality, we might be coming up with loads of great ideas, but they just feel small. You know, it's like you're just panning for gold rather than that massive nugget. So as a little side note, remember, please don't self-edit. There's so much great stuff that comes out of even what you think are the smallest ideas. You never know what other ideas others are going to have in the room because of the one you just had. It's really important to point that out. And the third anxiety, man, this is stressful. The third anxiety is creative performance anxiety. Now, this is birthed from this notion of, we want ideas to win. We want to win customers, we want to win the metric, we want to win awards, and we think that if we create this, and we're going to push it out into the world, like we're going to win, and we create it and push it out into the world. And what happens is that there is no fanfare, there is no fireworks, and yeah, it might kind of raise NPS, Net Promoter Score, a little bit. And whatever the metric is, like it might move the dial a little bit, and it feels a bit like bingo. It's like, did that work? Oh, yep. Did it raise the metric? Yep. Oh, bingo. It doesn't feel the way that good design should feel, and that's okay. It's not meant to. And here's what I want to get to. Ideas are a fluid connection and sparks and meanderings, and ideas are accidental. Ideas come up through arguments and late nights and showers. Did you find this? Does this resonate with you guys? This is what it's like. It's not those big birthing moments. And for me, I want to put this to you. I think innovation is more like a series of stones across a river than a big bridge. I'll tell you what I mean. So say you want to get across the river and you think, right, I'm going to build a bridge. I'm going to start here, and the end of my bridge is over there. I'm going to plot it, I'm going to build it, and it's done. Whereas for me, I find innovation is more like you put one stone in the river and you go, brilliant, that worked, and you hop on it and you've got someone else with you and they chuck a stone in and that works, and throw another one, that didn't work, and you've got to pivot a bit, and idea by idea, insight by insight, you get across that river. And often what happens is you realise that there's more than one solution, and that right solution might not be where you originally thought it was. So, I hope we didn't build that massive expensive bridge over there when we really need to be over there. I hope that makes sense. So at Atlassian, and this is what I impress upon the design team as well, like we want to come up with ideas to learn, not to win. Ideas are for learning, not winning. Now, I know that might sound like an empty aphorism, so ask yourself this. When was the last time you stuck an idea in front of some customers, not even with intention to shipping it, but just to stimulate like a rich, insightful discussion? Crazy. But you'd be amazed at what you'll learn, as I said, those happy insights that can come out of that. Okay, example time. So we do this, and here's a great example of what I'm talking about. Here's an attempt at real-time chat while looking at a board at the same time. Now, we ran it just the way I showed you before in those photos. People put the dots up in silence and we stopped. And you could see, like they bled all over it. They didn't like it. And when we unpacked that in conversation, people had comments like, I get it. Like, it's great that I can sort of check in with everyone in my team and we can have a conversation while looking at the board. But so this person is chatting to that one person. Are we the only ones who can see that chat? Or can they all see it? And what tool is this using? Is this using your tool, HipChat, or is it using my chat tool? And is this stored anywhere? What's going on? It was too confusing and too disorienting. And this was really good because what it stimulated for us was, did they like the idea of having a real-time chat while looking at a board at the same time? Yeah. Did they like it this way? No. And we never would have realised that if we had tons of internal arguments about this and never put this in front of customers. All right, so if I can say it in another way, concept testing helps you cross that river stone by stone. And just mentally, it frees you up to explore various design directions that you might have been editing and keeping inside before. So it helps you and it helps your team be open to those unexpected insights. It helps you be open to those unexpected conversations. That's what I really like about it. All right, I do want to leave time for some Q&A, but hopefully this has stimulated some interest to you. So if you're about to run down the front screaming at me and grabbing me by the collar to say, right, I'm in. What do I do? Here's just one easy thing to try. Whatever you're working on, even if it's a process, boxes and arrows, even if it's like a website, an application that you can show in wireframes or sketches, whatever it is, just try it internally first. Print it out or draw it. Rough as guts, it doesn't matter. As long as it makes sense without you standing in front of it and having to explain it all. Print it out, put up a sequence. Make sure there's some kind of scenario going on around those sketches that people will relate to, and give people those green dots and red dots and let them at it. And you can structure it a bit so they do the dots first, and then you can have that structured conversation. In this example here, we just put all these concepts up in a corridor area in one of the floors in the Sydney building. And we wrote up the scenario, and we wrote some directions. And you can see in the middle of the photo there's some red and green dots that people can just wander by and pick them up and give their feedback. Nothing wrong with that. It's in a safe, consequence-free space. And that's just internally, so give that a crack. And then you can build up to inviting customers in, if that's your bag. All right, there is time for Q&A, but I really want to impress upon you, this works for us, and it's the sort of thing that we invite people just like you in, and it's helping us go from strength to strength and helping us in our creative confidence. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. So we have 2 questions right now. If you have any other questions, please send them through the app. But to start, Ben, are there any tools that you use to test with customers in other countries?
Yes, yeah, really good question, and particularly if, like Atlassian, you have customers all over the place. My tool du jour at the moment is Qualboard. I think it's by 2020, but Google Qualboard and you'll find it. And it's great because you can put your designs online, and people can pinpoint exactly where they can pin their feedback. But as well as just pinning feedback, you can actually have like a forum-style discussion with multiple people at once. So there's quite a lot of control in Qualboard. That one springs to mind. Another one is InVision. Does anyone use InVision? Couple, yeah. With that one, you can certainly have direct pinned feedback. That's really cool, but you don't have that forum-style discussion, yeah.
Does anyone have any questions? I can run around with the microphone. Just raise your hand. Here you go.
Just want to.
Just a quick question. You mentioned that what concept testing is not for example, details on the user interface and all about the design. So I mean, it's in the company sometimes we do get those kind of feedback. So how do you tell the users or the people who are giving feedback that this is not the kind of feedback you're expecting, or not about the colors of the button, or about the UX, or like the size of the different elements?
Could I just check the question, if I can ask back to you? Is it around sort of setting expectations around?
Yeah. So the audience who is actually doing the feedback, do you have a set of guidelines that you provide to them in terms of?
Yeah, let me say a couple of things to that. So one, depending on the sensitivity of what you're testing, you can get them to sign an NDA. I've never had anyone who won't sign an NDA. The other thing, it is very important to set expectations. And this really goes to the spirit of testing to learn, not to ship. It's really important that everyone in the room knows that these ideas are raw and all up for grabs, and they're actually playing a part in the design process. So you can use the language of co-design if you like, but yeah, I'm really firm in setting expectations that they shouldn't expect anything that they see to actually ship into product. Yeah. But the way I do that is quite formally at the beginning of the 2 to 3 hour session. Yeah.
Thanks, Ben. I have like a simple question.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if my green and red overlaps? It happens to us all the time. And what should be our takeaway?
If you see green and red all the time.
Like I have a couple of greens on the same feature and a couple of red on the same feature. So.
Okay, yeah. All right, I can say a couple of things to that. One, just ignore it. No, I'm kidding. One is when you recruit into the concept testing, like it's a really good idea to know what their role is and what type of team they belong to, what company they come to, because that'll give you a really good lens on their feedback. So the example I showed you in the photos there, they were all project managers. And some of them were very waterfall and some were agile. And we got them into that room for a reason. Like that was by design. A little tip. Sometimes I give some people big dots and some little. Now, they don't know what that means. They just think it's random. But I know it's because like they're the more waterfall ones and they're the more agile ones, for example. So what that means then is you can assess, okay, so if this particular group of project managers rates this red, but the other group is kind of rating it green, that gives me that useful nuance to know, well, it looks like this one is much more suited to agile. But these are the sort of things that come out in discussion and conversation once you get to talk about where those dots are after they've put the dots on. Yeah, hope that helps. There's a hand over here.
That's actually all the time we have right now.
Okay.
So anyone that does have a question, just see Ben after the talk and you guys can chat. Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, guys.